Hi, and welcome to our Mysterious Press Historical Mystery Zoom. I'm Louisa Smith, and you may know me from my years as head buyer at Book Passage Bookstore, which gave me an opportunity to get to know and work with many of you wonderful booksellers. Today, I'm with you in my role as editor-in-chief of Penzler Publishers and Mysterious Press, which has given me the opportunity to work with incredible authors, and I'm thrilled to have 5 of them with us today. I'll be talking to each of these authors individually, but at the end, I would love to allow you a chance to ask your questions. As you know, questions from the audience are often the best part of these events, so please don't be shy. Go ahead and put your questions in the chat and let me know if you would like to ask the questions directly or have me read the questions to the author. So just a few housekeeping items before we begin. That will be recorded, as you heard, for you to share with anyone who is not able to make it today. Please let us know if you would like us to send it to you. We will be posting links for each of the author's books, an Edelweiss link if you're interested in arts, please now. For the event to run smoothly, please make sure to mute your microphone and turn off your camera for the first part. Once we're onto the questions from the audience, please feel free to turn those cameras back on. And with that, let us begin. We're going to start actually with Nicholas Meyer. Nicholas is an award-winning author, screenwriter, and director. His body of creative work in publishing, film, and television spans more than 5 decades. His publishing career began in 1974 with The 7% Solution, a Doyle tale in which Sherlock Holmes meets Sigmund Freud. The novel stayed on the New York Times bestseller list for 40 weeks and won the British Gold Dagger Award from the British Crime Writers Association. Meyer made his directing debut in 1979 with a film he wrote, Time After Time, and he went on to direct many movies, including the best Star Trek movie of all, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Meyer has also published 5 other Holmes novels, including Sherlock Holmes and The Telegram from Hell, which was published last year by Mysterious Press, and his 7th Sherlock Holmes novel, Sherlock Holmes and the Real Thing, will be published at the end of August. So welcome, Nicholas. And can you tell us a bit about your latest book?
My 7th Sherlock Holmes novel is called Sherlock Holmes and the Real Thing. It's a novel about art and art forgery. As a forger myself, I claim some experience in this area. Forgery is a very interesting topic as far as I'm concerned, and it poses many interesting moral, philosophical, cultural, legal, and aesthetic questions. And it's about Sherlock Holmes being asked to investigate what superficially appears not very much, an artist who has failed to pay his rent. But he finds himself in the cutthroat world of art in which big business and, as it turns out, cutthroats proliferate.
Wow. So can I start with the question? I know I didn't tell you I was going to ask ahead of time, but I've always been curious about what are the challenges about writing a book where the protagonist is already so well known and beloved, and people have very strong ideas about who he is? What are the challenges about writing using that character?
Well, I have to begin with the confession that when I wrote the 7% Solution, the first of these, I had no idea, A, that it would ever be published, much less that it would form part of a series. All I knew was that I never saw a Sherlock Holmes movie that I didn't despise, with very few exceptions. I never understood why Basil Rathbone hung out with Nigel Bruce. I never understood why a genius hangs out with a jerk. I didn't think that was, so I was writing as a kind of corrective. This was how I thought Sherlock Holmes should be, and I was sort of imitating Arthur Conan Doyle to the best of my ability. I'm sure there are other people who've done it better, but that was my impetus, and those were the rules I was going by, was just trying to be as much like Doyle as I could manage and sort of correct a few things like making Watson not a total dummy and things like that.
I don't think anybody's done it better, Nick. I'm sorry. So, can you
Okay, you win.
share can you share any behind the scene anecdotes or interesting facts in the creation of this book in particular?
As it happens, I can. In 1975, I was sent on the first of my book tours. This is back in the day when the publisher paid for the tour. I had a runaway bestseller, and I was 28 years old. And the first leg of the tour, I landed in Pittsburgh in a thunderstorm, and we had been shaken around a good deal. So I was very green about the gills. And I was met at the airport by a reporter who had been assigned from the Pittsburgh paper to interview the kid author. And I think he felt this assignment was beneath him. Nowadays, I don't think anybody would dream of sending an author to the airport, to a reporter to the airport to talk to an author. But this guy, who had a little chip on his shoulder, opened up by saying, "How does it feel to be a successful forger?" And I, still trying to get my bearings, the best I could manage was, well, it doesn't say by Nicholas Meyer. It says as edited by, that was the best I could do. But I went to sleep that night in a strange Pittsburgh hotel room, really sort of unable to shake this accusation. How does it feel to be? And then realizing, at about 2 in the morning, well, he's right. I am a forger. And that begat my interest in forgery, about which I hadn't given much thought. I just thought I was sort of playing a game. And then I started collecting a library on the subject of forgers. And that was ultimately what led to this book.
Wow, I had no idea about any of that. That's amazing. Um, so this is a moment in your personal life that inspired, or is there a different moment? I know we talked about this that inspired a scene in your book.
I don't know that there was a specific moment, or at least one that's coming to mind. The moment that inspired the book, and I guess it was like a 40-year gestation period, to finally get around to writing a book about forgery. But forgery, as far as I'm concerned, poses so many fascinating, perplexing, contradictory questions. If you can't tell the difference, what is the difference? And what's the difference between a forgery and a copy? It's something you can't see, the intention. A
Huh.
copy announces itself, I'm a copy. A forgery is trying to pass. And if you can't tell the difference, sort of what is the difference? Why can't you go to a museum store and buy your own Rodin hands or something? I have this argument with my girlfriend all the time, and that's why I wrote the book. I suddenly realized.
So your long career as a director, how does that affect how you write a scene? Or does it not affect how you write a scene?
It definitely does. I started as a filmmaker, a film writer, or film director, so I do tend to think in cinematic terms, and that means not only visually but also dramatically. I am a dramatist, and so the novels uh,
Mm.
probably follow certain dramatic conventions that you can probably find outlined in Aristotle's Poetics, because that's how it sort of works. Mystery stories ask a question, and the reader or the audience stays to find out the answer to the question. Will Hamlet kill the king? Will Romeo get Juliet? Will Oedipus find out who murdered the old king, etc. And that one with a special twist. And once the question is answered, then it's over. People go home.
I love that. I love that every book in a way is a mystery by that.
It's just like life.
Yep. Just like life. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Nick. I really appreciate it. I love what you do with Sherlock Holmes and these books. So thank you for being here today. We're going to
Thank you
move
for having
on. Oh, of course. We move on to from the person who's probably had the longest writing career to our debut author today. Uh, I told her I was going to mess up her name, and now I have like this fear I'm going to mess up your name that makes it hard to say. Olesya Lyuzna. I did it wrong. Terrible. Uh, Olesya is a historical fiction writer with a passion for queer noir. Her debut novel, a fun and gritty jazz age romp titled Glitter in the Dark, just published this past April. It had been selected for the 2020 Pitch Wars mentorship by Lane Fargo and Haley Sutton, and so far has received excellent reviews, landing it on multiple best of lists. Olesya was born in Odessa, Ukraine, and has lived most of her life in Toronto. In her time away from writing, she enjoys hosting pre-code movie nights and scouring the archives for unsolved crimes. Welcome, Olesya.
Thank you. Thank you.
So your book is so much fun. I love the jazz age and the characters. What did you do to prepare your mind to write in a different time period, to get in the mind of your characters?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so whenever I dive into a new project, I always like to think about all five senses, and usually one of them stands out more than the others. For this novel, because the central crime is the disappearance of a torch singer, and my protagonist Ginny is a party girl who spends most of her time in speakeasies and nightclubs. Music became a very big focal point for me. So I spend a lot of time listening to old jazz, discovering some semi-forgotten, slightly scandalous songs from the time. If anyone wants a fun listen, check out Lucille Bogan. You'll have a good time. And yeah, just trying to get that sort of jagged, uneven rhythm of a jazz song into the prose as well. I also, explored the other senses. At one point, I ordered a sampler of 1920s perfumes because I just had to figure out what Ginny would smell like. It's Guerlain Shalimar, the original formula, which came out 1925, if anyone's curious. And then, of course, the visuals. I am a very visual person. I love vintage style and fashion. So I spent so much time in the online archives of the Met looking at the fabulous outfits, and many of the outfits that you'll find in the book were inspired by real pieces in museums or on eBay in my wish list. Unfortunately, there are just so many that I can't add to my cart, but I put them in this book as a consolation prize.
Oh, I love that. And I realized I jumped right past the description of your book. Please, can you tell everybody a little bit about Glitter in the Dark?
Yeah, of course. So Glitter in the Dark, and a moment for this beautiful glittery cover. I just can't stop staring at it. But yes, it's a mystery set in 1920s New York City. It follows Ginny Duggan, a 20-something party girl, hard drinking, fast talking advice columnist who dreams of becoming a real reporter. And she just might get her chance when a torch singer is kidnapped from Harlem's hottest speakeasy. Now, Ginny tries to intervene, but unfortunately, the kidnappers have other plans. So they leave her with a bullet and they leave her for dead. And what starts as the scoop of her career turns into a dangerous and deeply personal mission for Ginny. It's kind of a coming of age story, a bit of a noir about ambition, found family, and the women who save our lives in club bathrooms, sometimes literally.
Something that still happens today.
Yeah.
I love Ginny so much. You know how much I love Ginny. Can you tell us what are your favorite qualities in a protagonist?
Yeah, so my absolute favorites, well, I guess it's a personal thing for me, and it's something I've recognized, recently reflecting on the protagonists I love to write. I love a loud, unapologetic, somewhat messy woman. So I love writing women who make bold decisions, who speak up, and who just go after what they want no matter what. And I realized recently, part of it is, of course, that I enjoy reading those types of books and getting that feeling, that good for her feeling at the end of the book, where you're just so happy to see a woman stand up for herself. But also, writing certain scenes in this novel, even though they take place in a different time and place, got me thinking about situations in my life, growing up, in the workplace, in my personal life. So many times I wish I'd spoken up or stood up for myself, and I didn't for various reasons. And so this book is my chance to rewrite history in that sense and to explore what would happen if I'd actually said everything on my mind. And sometimes the consequences would be disastrous, but it's really fun and really healing, I would say, to explore.
I love that. And so, since she's a woman and you talk about in the 20s, speaking her mind, how do you, and this is something that you would like to do, how do you sort of, how are the constraints on women back then? How do you work that in your book? Does it help form the story? Does it hinder the story in any sort of way?
It absolutely helps. I mean, living in the 1920s for Ginny, it comes with a whole range of challenges that she wouldn't necessarily have growing up today. And I think that is kind of a sneaky shortcut for me as a writer, because it helps me raise the stakes and increase the tension, because it's already built into the constraints of the time. For Ginny, too, she's a woman, but she's also bisexual in an era when she wouldn't even have the word for that. And so, she's figuring out her sexuality, figuring out, where she feels safe thinking and expressing it and where she doesn't. And so that greatly complicates the plot for her, because while she's, trying to move up in her career and figure out who the kidnapper is and solve the crime, she's also dealing with this very personal challenge in a time where it was maybe more difficult for her to express herself. So I think the bottom line is that, I mean, it makes things easier for me, because it makes things more complicated for Ginny. And I think as authors, we all really love a chance to make our characters suffer. So
I love that. Thank you so much, Olesya. We're now going to jump to a different time period and a different country where the stories are based. We're going to go to Charles Todd. Charles Todd is the author of the New York Times bestselling Inspector Ian Rutledge series and the Bess Crawford series. They have published over 30 titles, including 2 standalone novels, an anthology of short stories, and over 20 short stories appearing in mystery magazines and anthologies worldwide. His work has received the Mary Higgins Clark Award, Agatha Award, Barry Awards, along with nominations for Anthony, Edgar, and Dagger Awards. Originally, these were written as a mother and son writing team. Sadly, Carolyn Todd passed away in August 2021, but Charles has continued writing. And this fall, we'll be publishing an Inspector Rutledge Christmas novella titled A Christmas Witness, followed by a full Rutledge novel in winter 2026 titled A Day of Judgment. Welcome, Charles. Charles, you're muted still. But I know everybody.
Good morning. Thank you for having me, or good afternoon, depending on where you are.
Yeah, morning for me, afternoon for you, right? I would love for you to say a little bit about what maybe each of these books are, the novella and A Day of Judgment.
Well, big surprise, the Christmas novella, A Christmas Witness, is set at Christmas time. Caroline and I always enjoyed trying to take on new challenges to see if we could come up with a concept and make it work. Not so much the mystery itself, but what the concept would be. And what I tried to do with Christmas Witness was to intertwine a well-known Christmas story with actual events that were taking place. Ian Rutledge is sent to Kent because he's, even though it's Christmas time, being the youngest chief inspector and the newest and not having family, he was chosen to head down to Kent to investigate a situation where a colonel who had been on Kitchener's staff, and I'm sorry, Haig's staff during the World War I, was in fear for his life and had been attacked. And so Rutledge gets sent down to begin his investigation and see where it winds up.
Wonderful. Now, I know that setting is as important as characters in your mysteries. I mean, it's how
Mm.
I like to travel around England is through these books. So how do you pick your setting and inject a sense of place wherever you go?
I think the most important thing is to actually have what they call boots on the ground. You've got to go there. If to, to actually spend time in an area, get to know the people, get to know uh, the lay of the land, what strikes you as a potential author about the countryside, about the cities, the villages, the towns, spending time with the people in that specific area can enlighten you so much about things that have happened in the past and where they see themselves now. Uh, One of the great things is going to what is still observed in England is Market Day, uh, where, especially in the towns and even in some of the larger cities, people bring their wares in to sell everything from breads and cheeses to carpets and everything else. But the British are very hard to talk to, unless you're talking about their dog or something that they're selling, in which case they're wonderful to talk to, will provide you with all kinds of background information about their wares, how they made them, what brought that about, the history of their family, and it winds up being an excellent experience. It's obvious that I'm an American, but I don't go in with the camera around my neck and pencil and paper rapidly taking notes. Uh, Most people have no concept for what it is that I do for a living, and it's a lot easier to be accepted that way.
Interesting. So how do you mo bridge modern and historical beliefs and norms, in these
You
books?
can't. You really can't impose modern day values on a different time period. However, I think it's a question of emphasis.
Mhm.
The most obvious one in Rutledge's case is when he solves a crime that is then turned over to a coroner's inquest and then on for trial. Uh, the ultimate resolution is the death penalty. And yet that's a topic that has today is a lot more volatile than it was at that time period. At that time period, it was basically accepted that that was the punishment for any type of murder. And so, for example, we dealt with that in A Fearsome Doubt, where Rutledge is confronted by someone who said that he got the wrong person and they were executed. And uh, while it can be fodder for plots and ideas, it's something that you don't necessarily have to beat the drum about, so to speak.
Now, what is the one thing a reader has said to you that you've never forgotten or perhaps found startling?
I will never forget the time we were attending the Tucson Book Festival. And after our panel, we were outside at a tent doing the signing. And a gentleman came up after everybody had pretty much gone. And he shook my hand and he said, "Thank you for Rutledge," but he didn't let my hand go. And I did the usual, "Well, I'm glad you enjoyed him," and that kind of thing. And he said to me, and he looked me right square in the eye and he said, "No, you don't understand. Thank you for Hamish." And then he turned and walked away.
Wow. Wow. It must,
Maybe we got
yeah.
something right.
I mean, it must feel incredible when somebody has that reaction to your books, especially something like that, capturing that kind of trauma. So,
Yes, it really shook me at a totally different level because you're always smiling and happy to see all your different readers and fans and to sign books for them and talk to them about where they're from and that kind of thing. Uh, but he was dead serious.
well, thank you, Charles. Really appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Now,
Thank you for having me.
you. Now we're going to go to somebody who's physically across the pond there in England, Tom Mead. Tom is an
Hi,
author.
Louisa.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for being here late in your day.
My
Tom is an
pleasure.
author, translator, and aficionado of Golden Age crime fiction. He's the creator of the Joseph Spector Locked Room mystery series and which has been translated into 10 languages and counting. I just saw the beautiful China cover. Oh my gosh.
Yes, it's lovely, isn't it?
It is. And is soon to be adapted for the screen. His debut novel, Death and the Conjurer, was nominated for a Capital Crime Award for Debut Novel of the Year and the Historical Writers Association Debut Crown. It was also named one of the best mysteries of the year by The Guardian and Publishers Weekly. Its sequel, The Murder Wheel, was named one of the best traditional mysteries in 2023 by Crime Reads and the Daily Telegraph, as well as nominated for a Capital Crime Award and longlisted for the CWA Historical Dagger Award. We are thrilled to be publishing the fourth in this delightful series, The House at Devil's Neck, this July. So welcome, Tom. Can you tell us a little bit about Spectre and The House at Devil's Neck?
With pleasure, yes. Thank you very much, Louisa. Nice to see you, and thank you everybody for tuning in. So this is as you say, it's the fourth in the Joseph Spector mystery series. The series is set in the 1930s in England, so it's very heavily Golden Age mystery inspired. They are locked room mysteries. So the emphasis is very much on the puzzle and the sussing out not only who done it, but how the crime was committed. So my series detective is a retired magician, an old vaudevillian, if you like, called Joseph Spector. And he is called in by Scotland Yard because he has such a unique insight into the world of theatrical gimmickry and stagecraft. And he is called in to supply his insight into seemingly impossible crimes, crimes which have the appearance of magic tricks. So the House at Devil's Neck is it's a suitably gothic title for a very kind of spooky setting where we follow this motley band of travelers out to this derelict old house which is on an island separated from the mainland by a very narrow causeway, and they are going there to conduct a séance. And this is in 1939, just on the brink of the Second World War. And Spector is there in his capacity as a skeptic and a debunker of fraudulent mediums. And once they get there, a series of very strange things begin to happen, culminating in not one but three seemingly impossible locked room murders, each in very strange circumstances.
Wonderful. So what prepared you for writing mysteries and historical novels?
Well, I mentioned stage magic. My fascination with magic goes back a long way, but growing up reading the likes of Agatha Christie, Sherlock Holmes, and crucially John Dixon Carr, who was a great proponent of the locked room mystery genre. it struck me that there is a real there is a real parallel between the world of mystery writing and stage magic. In both instances, there is a performer who is effectively controlling and guiding the perceptions of an audience in a certain direction. It's about making sure that your audience doesn't see how the trick is worked. And to me, that the same goes for mystery writing. It's about, hiding clues in plain sight. There's a kind of rise and fall like you get in a magic show, and there's a big reveal at the end, and everybody applauds, that sort of thing. So I suppose my fascination, not just with the performing of magic, but with the actual the actual technical gimmickry, but the psychological practice that goes into it as well. So I suppose when I first started writing mysteries, it was about trying to extrapolate some of that and kind of lift it wholesale and plant it in the world of the murder mystery.
I love it. Something I've always wondered is, do you come up with like what magic tricks you want to use and then build the mystery around that? Or do you come up with a locked room and then think, how would a magic trick get me out of this?
Well, to be quite honest, the answer is it's 50-50. I've tried it both ways, and in Devil's Neck, which is the latest in the series, we have I knew I wanted to include a seance, so that entailed a lot of research into books about real life spiritualist mediums and and some of the shadier practices that they got up to in the aftermath of the First World War, when there was this kind of boom in seances and efforts to contact the deceased, and inevitably there were confidence tricksters who would exploit this, bereavement and in the aftermath of the war and that kind of thing. And so they would also use what was essentially a kind of stage magic to create these scenarios to try and convince people of real life um, uh, phenomena from beyond the veil. So I knew I wanted to have that in it. So I set about researching and coming up with some of the real tricks that they used and incorporating them in various ways. And some of those tricks suggested ways that an impossible crime could be committed. So I decided to kind of lean into that and use that for the basis of the plot, more generally speaking. However, there is a separate plot strand, if you like, which is about another murder disguised as a suicide in a room which is sealed up on the inside. So a classic locked room scenario in a house in London, which is kind of running parallel to this plot line out at Devil's Neck. And that was very much an instance where I had a trick in mind that I wanted to use, and so it was about kind of contriving the circumstances so that it would fit neatly. So it's kind of 50-50. But I'm always on the lookout for tricks and ideas, and I read a lot about 19th century stage magic and things like that, and I'm just fascinated by how it all works behind the scenes.
Okay, one last question for you, Tom, because I know that you are probably one of the best read in terms of Golden Age mysteries. Who are the authors that you draw inspiration from that people should be reading?
Wow, that's a great question. I do try to read as much Golden Age mystery as I can, because that's the genre that I grew up with, and it fascinates me, and it still does to this day. I mentioned Agatha Christie, of course. She was my introduction to the genre, but I also mentioned John Dixon Carr, and he is a personal hero of mine. His twin, I suppose his idols when he was growing up were Edgar Allan Poe, Arthur Conan Doyle, Harry Houdini. So, and you can really see those influences in his work. And I suppose when I first started writing, I was trying to channel that kind of stylized, theatrical, grand guignol approach. Because to me, it's just wonderful. And there's nobody who writes quite like him. And another author I would like to mention, who I don't think gets enough appreciation really, is Christiana Brand, who is an English author who wrote Green for Danger, which is a great wartime mystery novel. And she wrote a really fantastic, impossible crime story called Death of Jezebel. And to me, they are two absolute masterpieces. And I think she should be much more widely read. But then there are so many others like Ellery Queen, Patrick Quentin. So I'll leave you with those few.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tom.
Thank
We're
you
going to come.
for having me.
We're going to come back over stateside to an author who it's less about the puzzle and more about the character, I think, Amy Bloom. Amy is the author of 4 previous best-selling novels, White Houses, Lucky Us, Away, and Love Invents Us. 3 collections of short stories, Where the God of Love Hangs Out, Come to Me, a finalist for the National Book Award, and Blind Men Can See How Much I Love You, which is a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award, as well as New York Times best-selling memoir, In Love. Her new book is pubbing on June 24th from Penguin Random House and is a gorgeous multi-generational novel titled I'll Be Right Here. This woman can write anything, and so we are thrilled to hear she was interested in trying her hand at crime fiction. The result is a delicious campus mystery novel filled with those wonderful characters you expect in an Amy Bloom book, titled Blunt Instrument. It'll be published in spring 2026. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you.
So, since we're talking about historical today, we're going to talk about your PRH book because that has a lot of historical elements, but maybe you can just touch at the end on Blunt Instrument and that book as well. Can you give us a little preview as to what I'll Be Right Here is all about?
Sure. I mean, you did a perfectly good job. You know, it's a saga of a found family, a chosen family. It goes across, you know, about a century and a half and a couple of continents and, you know, war and surprises and unexpected love and, you know, cruelty and benevolence and occasions of chance and surprise. And my children say I write about 4 things: death, sex, family, and love. And I feel like that's plenty. But I think it is, those are my, what did Richard Rhodes say? He said that, you know, the writer doesn't find the subject finds the writer. And I think what I'm always interested in is basically people. You know, if you take me to the gallery, I will appreciate the landscapes. I will always look at the portraits. You know, that's what moves me, is people's lives. And so this book has a brother and sister who are young in Paris during the occupation. They go their separate ways. The girl winds up as basically the tweenie for Colette, which was a joy to research because, you know, when you've got a wonderful monster like Colette, you don't want to let go in a hurry. And eventually come to America, and she works in a bakery, and the siblings are reunited, and they collect around themselves a sort of found family that goes on to be known to the younger generation as the Greats. And part of what really drove the book is the mystery, not of a particular body or an event, but the way in which I think parents and grandparents are mysteries to their children. You do not know who those people were before you came into the world. And that's always been interesting to me. I did not come from the kind of family where people like to share stories and histories. I came from the kind of family where you said to people, "Oh, tell me what it was like in the old country." And they would say things like, "Not great." So I was really interested in sort of excavating the history of a family.
A question just occurred to me that I'd love to know the answer for you is your book spans a number of different times. How how difficult is it, or is it difficult to show those distinct times? Do you find yourself changing the way people speak in each time or how they like how do you keep that straight when you're having the same characters but over a big span of time?
Well, language is a great interest for me, and I grew up in a family in which several languages were spoken, and the way in which people express themselves and who they became in different languages was always really, really interesting to me. My grandmother, who was a mild, quiet, I would say not overwhelmingly enthusiastic person in English, in Yiddish was a virago. I mean, better than a virago. She was Maria Callas. And I've always been interested in how that is. So it's not, I don't have any interest in writing in dialect, but I am always interested in the way the inflection shifts for the language. I'm always interested in the difference between my father saying, I will never forget, and my grandfather saying, I am never forget. And those tones just carry, they are sort of, it seems to me, the music. My job is the lyrics, but those tones and those accents and inflections, that's the music of the dialogue.
So I think I know the answer to this story, but what drives your story forward then? The character or the plot, and how do you feel they're intertwined in this one?
Yes, I hope for them to be intertwined. Learning how to write mysteries really required that I improve my plot game a great deal. I started out writing short stories, and my kind of short stories, I used to say they were like the French films of the early 60s. Somebody would walk in, they'd fold a napkin, there'd be glances, they'd leave the room, and that would be the end of it. So I had to really move along with plot, and history helped me do that because so filled with incident, so filled with details, so filled with event. But for me, character leads because the things that happen in part because of who we are. And it's not just the things that happen, but it's what we do with the things that happen. I don't think events make us. I think events reveal us.
Ooh, I love that. I love that. So have there been moments from your personal life that inspired a scene or two or character in your book?
I think lots of different pieces from lots of different people. I always think that if a novelist tells you it's all made up, they are lying, just like if a memoirist tells you it's all true, they are lying. Um, for me, there is a particular character who becomes a chicken farmer when they get to America, which is absolutely based on my own family and the chicken farm, and seeing my lovely great aunt, the kindest of women, wring chickens' necks, like she was making toast, was a revelation to me when I was 7 years old. And her character is very present in the novel.
Oh, I love that. So during research for this book, was there anything that was surprising to you or particularly interesting?
I had not expected to be so engaged with the Algerian struggle. There's some connections for that in my family, but I had not expected to be so moved by their struggle for freedom, by their massacre by the French at the end of World War II, having been soldiers for the French. Um, that was very powerful for me. I didn't know that I was going to find myself engaged in that story. That's one of the joys of research, I think. You don't know what path you're going to go down in the garden. Also, for me, I think Colette, who I had always admired as a writer, had been for most of her life a sort of, mildly anti-Semitic, educated bourgeois Parisian until just her luck. She fell madly in love with her third husband, who was Jewish. and spent the entire war trying to save him, which she did, and hiding him and trying to do her best to appease Germans, even as it made her throw up after the dinners. And that was a side of her and her passionate devotion to him that I didn't know anything about.
Wow, I love that. Thank you so much, Amy, for all of that. Um, I can't believe that it's already 10:50. Now is the time for us to think about any questions you might have about the book. I can happy to ask a few things of the authors while you guys think of them, but I would so appreciate if you came up with any of your own questions. Anne Holman, I see you're here. I love that you're here. That's so wonderful. And Tina Ferguson, thank you, Tina, for being here. So Nicholas Meyer, can I ask you, who do you enjoy reading these days? Because I know that's something that booksellers are always curious about.
I read a lot of history and biography. The novelists that I love, who are said to be, contemporary, whether we're talking about Philip Roth or John le Carre, Graham Greene. I like authors and novels where the plot and the theme are inseparable, where you can't even just tell the story without they're so intertwined that the story is the theme. I think when you look at a movie like The Third Man, or you read some Graham Greene, or Le Carre in particular, and the rest of the time I read a lot of history and a lot of biography. I'm reading now about Cairo during the Second World War, and what somebody would call ignorant armies clashing by night. That's sort of the short answer.
It's a good answer. Joe has a great question, and I will just throw it out there for everybody. Unless, Joe, would you like to ask it yourself? You turn on your, okay, I'm not going to make you turn on your microphone and camera if you don't want to.
Sorry, you can do it.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Joe. Joe's so great. So he asks, any favorite sites you visited in the name of research? So anybody like to jump on that?
I can
Yeah,
right
go
on
ahead.
it. When I was
Yeah.
writing my previous novel, which you have behind you, Sherlock Holmes and the Telegram from Hell, which is about the Zimmerman telegram, for those who know what that is. I went to Mexico City because by the time Holmes and Watson get there, I realized that even though I had been to Mexico City years before when I was making a movie there, I really never got to see the city, and in particular the role that it played in the Zimmerman telegram. And I was astonished to find that there is a telegraph office, which is now a museum, which has an exhibit solely devoted to the Zimmerman telegram. So I was very glad to make that trip. It was
Crazy. I had no idea. I was just in Mexico City. I had no idea that was there. Next time. That's fascinating.
I always found the British Heritage site really good. They have a lot of links and a lot of information, not only about what has happened, but latest updates on what's been given a blue plaque and all those things that uh, are great. Not only are they good research, but they're wonderful things just to keep in touch with what's going on as far as historic England is concerned.
Well, it's interesting. That's a nice resource to have. Alicia,
Yes, it is.
did you have something?
Yeah, I was just thinking, I started writing this book during the pandemic, and so my travel was a bit limited. But I found a lot of great materials on archive.org, specifically silent films. So I found that very helpful. And quite often, when you're looking for something that's, doesn't exist in many different prints, you'll probably find it there. And then once things opened up, I greatly enjoyed a research trip to New York where I visited the Back Room, which is a speakeasy that's been around since the 1920s, although it's gone through a few iterations and it likely looks different today than it did then. But that felt very special and very helpful in bringing the speakeasies to life in the novel.
Wow, do you need a special passcode to get into the Back Room?
No,
for anybody
but
that might want to go visit?
No, but we did have to ask around to find it because there are no labels or anything. It's just kind of in an alleyway, but I can share the details, Louisa.
Oh, yes, just for research, purely for research purposes. Thank you. Tom, did you have a place that you were thinking of?
Yes, like Olesya, I frequent archive.org a lot for the purposes of, I suppose, more esoteric research. There are three particular things that I used it for when I was writing The House at Devil's Neck. First of all, it was spiritualism, which I've already talked about, but particularly spirit photography and ghost hunters. And there was a real life ghost hunter in the 1920s and 30s called Harry Price, and all of his books are available there, plus biographies of him and things like that. So I found that very fascinating, and it suggested certain plot elements in the book. The other thing is there is an automaton in the book, which is something that I always wanted to include, a kind of a creepy mechanical construction. It's inspired by a real life automaton. I suppose Edgar Allan Poe wrote about the famous chess player known as the Turk. So I suppose that's what really got me interested. But then John Dixon Carr included something similar in his book, The Crooked Hinge. So I knew that I wanted to have something like that, but I didn't have a clue how they worked or what they really looked like. So I found certain books about that. And the last thing is I wanted the house itself, the house at Devil's Neck, to have a real atmosphere of something sinister and occult going on. So I made a point of tracking down some materials by the likes of Aleister Crowley, Dion Fortune, the kind of the people who kind of cultivated this persona of something sinister and otherworldly in their writing. So I tried to kind of channel some of that in. So there's a kind of cocktail of influences.
I don't think I'd go to sleep if I did that kind of research. I'd be way too creeped out. So I think we have one final question here from the audience, which is wonderful. Jennifer, do you want to ask it yourself, or would you like me to ask it?
I can ask it. If you could cast your main character for a film, who would you cast? I'm especially interested in Olesya's.
Yeah, I do have an answer for that one. So when I was writing Ginny, I was always thinking about Anya Taylor-Joy, but with darker hair. I think especially like her role in the Queen's Gambit and that sort of, the chaotic performance she puts on there, and also in Last Night in Soho, really kind of, to me, she is Ginny. So yeah, thank you. I love that question.
Any of you other authors have ideas?
Willem Dafoe for me. I watched Nosferatu recently, the Robert Eggers movie, and his performance in that is so kind of wild-eyed and theatrical and larger than life that I thought, yes, that's Spectre, my kind of aging conjurer.
I'd like, if I could, to make a slight detour, but going into this business about the Turk, the automaton chess player, there is a terrific novel that I think sort of came and went maybe 30, 40 years ago called King Kill by a man named Thomas Gavin, about whom I know very little about. But the novel's premise is that the Turk was in fact, it's not real. There was somebody in the machine playing chess, and in the novel, it's about we meet a chess playing wizard named Schlumberger, who is a hunchback, and he plays against the Turk, and he wins. And out from under at the end of the game, covered in sweat and dressed in very little clothing, is the confederate of the Turk, who was a beautiful woman who is described as sort of emerging like Venus from the sea from the inside of the Turk. And Schlumberger falls in love with this woman who's not a very good chess player, but could fit in down there and do the best she could. It's a terrific novel why he falls in with being the creature in the machine, just to be near that girl and the manipulative manager. King Kill by Thomas Gavin.
That sounds great.
Yeah, King Kill is great.
Yeah.
And when I was working on my Houdini miniseries, which starred Adrian Brody and was based on my dad's Houdini biography, I went into Burbank to a shop where the man makes magical illusions for famous magicians. It was a big warehouse. And in that warehouse, he had a lot of memorabilia. He had Houdini's trunk and so forth. He also had the Turk. He had it. And I saw it. I don't know that anybody could have fit inside it, but somebody obviously did.
Oh, wow. That's a wonderful turn. Thank you for telling us about that. That's very creepy and fabulous. I'm gonna have to check out King
Keep
Kill.
forgetting to hold this up, but there's my latest.
Thank you for that. Actually, if you have your book, feel free to hold them up. We are at 11:02, so I feel like we have to let these booksellers get back to selling our books, which we so appreciate. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. Really such a joy to be here with you all. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. We will be sending out the Edelweiss link and the recording. But I can't thank you enough for being here live today. It's so different to have you here in person. And I hope to see you actually in the flesh in person very, very soon. From all of us at Mysterious Press, we really appreciate you being here. Thank you. Oh, Tina, thank you. Love seeing you guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, folks.
So long.
Thank you, Louisa.
Bye
Oh,
bye.
thank you, Molly. Thank you, guys.